Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for joining again. Since I haven't taken a CFA or a PFT since the end of the last century, I've asked somebody to help us out with that. His name is Joe, and Joe is going to talk to us a little bit about the CFA and maybe a little bit about the PFT. So, Joe, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep. Hey, thanks for having me on. I am a Naval Academy graduate, currently just about 11 years active duty in the Marine Corps. So I have a little bit of experience, physical fitness, both as a personal interest, but also professionally. And I do take a particular keen interest in getting people ready for, military service and the service academies in particular.
So thank you so much. So Joe, I have here in front of me, I have the basic breakdown from West Point, your arch rival there from the Naval Academy, on what the candidate fitness assessment is. It's the basketball throw, pull-ups, flexed arm hang, shuttle run, modified sit-ups, and push-ups. So the question I received from one of my viewers was, do you have any tips or tricks or any recommendations on how to be successful with the CFA? So if you had to go and take the CFA again, this point, what would you do to prepare for it, and how would you max out your scores?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question the way it was phrased because there are no tricks in physical fitness. I think that's something people need to realize is that these tests are going to really show you where you are in an honest way, and sometimes the reality is not what you want it to be. But that's the beauty of it, right? You can't fake the time on the run. So if I was to go into it again, I would want to have the absolute best score possible in the CFA. Physical fitness is always going to be a thing that sets you apart from the crowd. It makes you better in all aspects, of your military service. And you really don't want to be that guy in the slow group during plebe summer, right? That's not the person that you want to be. So looking at the PFA, of course, I look at what's the max score, right? How do I get to the max score? And that's kind of like the target that I want to be at. I would focus on the pull-ups, the crunches, the push-ups, the mile run. And those are the events that are going to carry you through in your military career, whether you're in the Navy or the Marine Corps. Those are the most similar events. But step one is you need to take the CFA and record your scores. You need to have a baseline for where you are before you even go forward. A lot of guys, if you're a track and field athlete, a 520 mile is not very impressive. So you kind of have that in the bag, but you need to get an accurate metric for you sit is step one.
So yeah, that's a good point. Having being a former track athlete back in the day, the run was never a problem. The shuttle run was never a problem. I always seem to have a problem with the pull-ups and the push-ups. So if you were a young candidate, what would you do to ensure your max score as close as you can get to it with the pull-ups and the sit-ups?
Yeah, I think those are also, really good indicators, of overall fitness. I once had a individual in a special mission unit say that if you can do 20 pull-ups, you're probably above average fit in other regards. So it's a really good test. 18 is the max score for the CFA. So I would look at when I want to take the CFA for score. I still think you can take it at like summer seminar, and that's going to be like your score for record, and then I would back plan from there. Uh, I would probably, now that I'm, not 18, I would plan on not getting injured, try and avoid overtraining. But I think as an 18-year-old, you probably don't have that problem as much. I think there's a lot of different training methodologies. You got to find what works for you. But really, a period of training over a longer time is better, right? So if you are a high school junior and you're like, man, I got to start doing this, you're a little bit behind the curve. You can catch up, but you're still behind the curve. You probably should be, watching this video, getting ready your freshman year or sophomore year, so that by the time you take it, at summer seminar or with your blue and gold officer or your coach or whoever's administering it for you, you've already done this a few times and you understand, how to get that max score. A guy that can't do a single pull-up and a guy that can do 10, or very, very different, training methodologies. I find, pull-ups are very challenging for a lot of people. I try and do pull-ups every single day. And for me, I can always get my max score, my max 23 pull-ups, and it just becomes a thing you do all the time. And that way I never really lose, the gains that I've gotten per se.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I kind of looked at this, I had to go into a flashback here, but when I was in the Navy, it was always the run and these other, it was the sit-ups, the run, I think it was push-ups back in the day, but it was like a 3.5 or a 3 mile run back then, which I never had a problem with. Um, but it was always the push-ups. Push-ups were always a problem for me. So what I would do is I would just I wouldn't worry about the run. I wouldn't worry about the sit-ups. I would just go and just do the push-ups, do push-up after push-up after push-up, and get ready for that test. Because at that time I was one of the senior officers, and that's the last thing you want to do is be embarrassed in front of it. So I think the secret, and I think what you're saying, I think the secret is like practice. You can't walk onto this cold. You got to just prepare and find your weak spot and just practice.
Yeah, you can't walk into a cold. I think, part of our conversation here is also revealing part of the issues with like, hey, I'm going to go buy this program or this plan. And there are phenomenal programs and plans out there, but they're not tailored to what you need as an individual. I think we go back to our analogy of like the track and field athlete. Like he doesn't need the running stuff in the plan. He needs to get his push-ups and his sit-ups and his basketball throw down. So I tend to have people like shy away from plans that are like cookie cutter or whoever's program, and instead like you need to practice what you need to get better at. You need to like develop the skill. And I think a big thing too now is that we all have very high def cameras on our person. You can film yourself taking this test so that when you do get there and the person's counting your push-ups and he's going 1, 1, 1, 1 because your form is terrible, well, it shouldn't be a surprise because you've watched yourself and you're like, oh yeah, I do look this way, or I'm not executing it perfectly. And I think that's something that a lot of candidates probably aren't used to. They probably practice a certain way, they do it in isolation. And then when they're actually put in front of someone who is an impartial judge, their pull-ups aren't exactly dead hang. They're not going all the way down their sit-ups. And now their very, very high score becomes a very, very mediocre score.
That's a very good point. That's a good point. Um, Let me ask you this question, and this is the age-old question. What's the purpose of the basketball throw?
So it's a pretty interesting, event. I think that Stu Smith, who is a phenomenal, trainer, like he's really like the guy who's a very solid resource. He says that it is a way of measuring potential athleticism. And I think that's like a really good way of looking at it. Can you coordinate your body, within the set parameters? Can you throw a ball with some form of accuracy? Like these are things that, indicate potential for athleticism. And I think that's also kind of like leads into the mission of the Service Academy is to develop you physically. They're not asking for the perfect guy at I-Day. They're asking for someone with high potential so that we can mold him or her into that better physical specimen.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Um, I think people have to make a distinction between academics and um, physical ability or physical, what shape you are in physically. I mean, there is the academic part of getting into the academy. There is the team sport, individual sport scoring that helps you get into the academy. But I think this CFA is really just a baseline that you are physically fit to endure the rigors of the academy and to move on and just improve at the academy.
Yeah, and I think people don't recognize that all these service academies, everything is interconnected. So say you struggle on the run, you fail the PRT run, Well, now that whole semester, you're dealing with the consequences of that. You have mandatory fitness, you have mandatory weigh-ins potentially if you're overweight. You're worried about that, right? Like it's like all these things that are taking away energy from your academics,
Yeah, that's a good
everything
point.
else you're doing. I look at, my academy time, right? Like I did not have the easiest time academically, but I'd show up, I get a max score in the PRT, and I never thought about it ever. Now imagine me with the same academic challenges. I have to worry about passing the PRT.
Yeah, I can share back in the day where I went to school, um they if you couldn't pass the PRT, they actually put you on a thing called Fat Squad, which would not go over today, but it was called Fat Squad. And that would be mandatory training every day, 6 days a week. So what that would do would take away from your academic time where you can study, and then people would go from being on Fat Squad to also being on academic probation because they were failing a class. And I don't care if it's any of the five schools, things snowball very quickly. So you can go from Fat Squad to academic probation to dismissal very easily.
Yep, yep. And that, it impacts the way people view you in your class. It impacts your, chances of getting what you want for service selection. You got to realize you're competing against, all the best people, and there's a version of you, in your class and those, other thousand midshipmen who has the same grades, the same everything, but he runs faster. He does more push-ups. Like who are they going to select for that very selective thing? Like it's a very easy choice because
Mhm.
it's just numbers, right? Like I have a guy with a 3.5 GPA and a perfect PRT score, a guy with a 3.5 GPA and a not so good PRT score. Like very easy selection criteria. So you really want to try and weigh everything in your favor, both getting to the academy and then on your way through there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Well, I didn't want to make this a long video. I think the message to everybody out there taking the CFA is to practice, to start early, to identify your weak spots, and to get it done. I mean, most importantly, get it done. Follow the instructions. I didn't print out. I have one sheet here, but just for West Point, there was like a half a dozen or 8 sheets of instructions on what to do. Um, and one thing that I know you've done some interviews for congressmen and senators, but one thing that we have seen in the past is that there's always been some suspicion on the non-filmed CFA tests. And I think the point that I want to make is that if you cheat, you're only really cheating yourself. You could get in, and you're going to suffer for it. You're going to suffer either you're going to be on remedial training or you're going to be the last guy dragging yourself around the whole summer, and it's just not a good thing.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's 100% true.
Yeah.
You're cheating yourself. There's no reason not to film it. And I think that, if you film yourself getting a perfect score, yeah, that's very compelling evidence to be selected.
All right, very good. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. Um, really good interview. Thank you so much for your time. But would you be willing to come back and maybe discuss a little bit about how you got into the Naval Academy? Maybe your 4 years there at the school, what you did, some of the high points, some of the low points, and then how you transitioned from the Naval Academy to the United States Marine Corps. Would you be willing to do that for future videos?
Yep, absolutely. Whatever you need, I'm available.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I think there's no better advice that you can get for physical fitness from a United States Marine. And Joe, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thank you.